only a $39,750 cost per year. What is the difference? What has changed besides the staffing? That we now have only this cost as compared to all these, somehow these other costs, that we're now thinking about this profit differential. And it's not being done by someone in finance, it's being done by people who don't have a financial background. I can't do it.
I have a few comments. During the discussion of where the library was going to go and where it was going to go in the park, for instance, one of the comments that was made by several of our council members was that they were very concerned that the library would bring in additional parking, and therefore that parking would be a problem for residents who wanted to enjoy the park. Well, I don't know how many of you have ever gone there when we've had big weddings at the park. There is not a parking spot available. Most of the residents, I believe, if they're going to use the park, probably want to use it at weekends, because for people that work, and like some of us, that's the time when they're off. And I have gone to that park many times, not just at weekends, but for weddings and weekends. And for big events, every parking spot is filled. I don't believe that's the purpose of the park. And the second item that was brought up during the library discussion was, well, this library is going to be used by people who don't live in Atherton. Do you realize that 99% of the weddings are for people that don't live in Atherton? And therefore, we're being totally inconsistent. And I just happened to read Olive Palmer's will. So I was going through some of this stuff. And even though it may not be legally binding, we're certainly not honoring what she said. She said, such property shall not be used, occupied, or operated for commercial or housing purposes, except only as it might be strictly incidental and appropriate for use as a public recreation park. Well, it's not any good as a public recreation park when every parking spot is filled. So my feeling is, at least on weekends, I could never support in any way allowing weddings there on weekends. During the other periods, if we limited the number of people, which we never did, like we had 800 Google employees here at one time, for which we charged them $1,000, which is ridiculous. But I might support activities during the week, smaller activities during the week. I certainly could never support having large weddings, which we have all the time, on weekends, which is when our residents want to use the park.
Any other council comments?
Yeah, the agenda item has to deal with excuse me, the 2012 events at the using the park for 2012 events. I have confidence that we have a competent town staff. I've been told by town staff that with the new arrangements that have been made with the third party, that each event that is now held at the park will not cost the town money, but the town will make money on each event. Do I understand it correctly?
Correct.
Therefore, I'm in favor of going ahead and booking events through 2012, including weddings and other large groups. This may be the last time that we can do so. I want to make certain that these events are profitable and help to offset the cost of the town park. The town needs incremental revenues, profits to help offset park expenses. We haven't really given our third-party firm the opportunity yet to show what the bottom line can be. If they're allowed to go ahead and book these regional library in the park will mean that many more non-residents will use the park. What kind of example does this set for our town's staff? Council members have been asked to make sacrifices, even cutting their coffee. But we can turn our backs on being able to offset some costs of the park. It's more than dollars, it's a message that we are sending to say we won't hold these events because of complaints from a few residents or inconvenience on a Sunday afternoon. It's the only reason that we're not going to go ahead on this. I can't think of any other rational alternative but to allow staff to apply the new management ground rules for booking events and see what 2013 brings.
I have a couple questions. Deborah, did you have a chance to look at the numbers, working with Mike and Steve on this?
We did look at the numbers after we spoke today, and I think Steve can respond to the analysis of some of the expenditures. And I do have some details for the revenue that has been collected. I think there is a methodology of the expenditures that are listed here as additional costs. They are directly related and proportionate of the budget. As compared to the total budget, is a proportion of there that we feel is covering the expenses for events only. And just to respond to one of the council members' comments, I think the staffing costs in the prior years is what made the net loss of the event program is due to the staffing costs. And as Councilmember Thompson said, the new contract with the third party is a different financial structure, which I believe will protect the city from the losses.
Have you included the costs of ecology or insurance or depreciation or replacement costs or costs of the site like parking lot repair and upkeep and all those things?
We have not included a lot of those because, again, we're talking about 1 year. And with the thought that this would be the last year and in anticipation of the site not being available for calendar year 2013 because there would be construction going along at that site. So that's
Let me add though too, we don't pay for waste costs. That's part of the contract.
correct.
And we're self-insured. So we don't have any insurance costs over and beyond what we already would normally have. So those are costs that are not appropriate. Mr. Mayor, I think that we have two camps here going in different direction. And I want to make it clear that the staff has no dog in this fight. If you all determine from a policy standpoint that it's not appropriate to continue events in the park, there's no one here that has their feelings hurt. Tonight at 12:01, we'll close that down happily. If you tell us to continue to do it, we will continue to do it. The report, which I would be happy to share with the press, does not include previous years. You know, I can have a consulting business and I make $1 million a year. You think I'm doing pretty good because that's what my revenue says. But if my net revenue is minus $500,000, I'm not doing so good. Previous years, because the model was so badly put together, was a gigantic loser. It was. And mostly because it was terribly run. It was overstaffed, and about a third of the costs were probably never recovered. Former Mayor Dobby beat me incessantly to either make that a winner or to get rid of it, which I took to heart. And together, we changed the structure of how we do events at the park. Today, we make a modest profit, somewhere in the $75,000 to $85,000 a year. I really think the question here is not splitting pennies. Do we make 75? Do we make 65? Do we make 90,000? Do you want to continue to do this in the park or no? And as it stands today, the decision on this has been delayed so long, I think that we're going to lose the contractor who we split the profits with, or who we have an arrangement with. We have no staff time that's involved in it other than some specialty items. Either tell us to continue with it, in which case we renegotiate, move forward, and we'll continue having it, or say it's not worth the hassle. And we'll stop it. But it really isn't bad reporting. It is, you have to remember that we were only asked to say, what are the expenses this year? Are we gonna make a profit or not? We're gonna make a small profit. And that's my comment, and we take no offense to whatever you direct us to do, period.
I just want to make one additional comment, that, you know, for this amount of money, we're not taking the use of the park by residents into account whatsoever. It's just amazing to me that we as a council cannot be considering the residents of Atherton and the use of the park by the residents of Atherton. And I can assure you, nobody is going to go to the park that has a car when we have those huge events there. And I think that's ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous for what I think will end up. Because if you cut out the weddings and the weekends, you still would make $30,000. And for a peanut amount like $30,000, to deprive our residents of the use of the park on weekends, I think for us, and I'll include Jerry in this case, is irresponsible, totally irresponsible.
So I would like to make a comment. I haven't had my turn yet.
Okay.
So I really feel that in this economic time, we've slashed our budgets, we've laid off people, we've reorganized, and we've counted every penny, every paper clip, every coffee cup. And if we have a model right now in front of us where we can make $10,000 to offset some $15,000, $20,000, I mean $85,000 in renting out the park in this model, I think it is totally irresponsible of this council to not go ahead with it post haste. We've been advised by the city manager that we are likely to lose the momentum that we have going with the B&G's contractor, and we will lose the booking season. So I really want to urge our council members to call for the vote, take a motion, and move forward with this, and do the right thing for our residents, and make the money that is in front of us.
I'd like to follow up. I don't think we've counted any paper clips. I don't think we've counted any coffee cups. And I think we're fine in our own coffee. I don't miss it, and I don't miss us not having dinners either. Especially if it means that the people of the town of Atherton aren't subsidizing things like these events. And until someone proves to me they're not doing it, I still stand by what I said. And even if it's just for 1 year, I don't care if it's for 6 months or 1 month. If we're subsidizing, we're subsidizing, and it hasn't been proven that we're not doing that, because there are still a lot of costs that we would be continuing to incur in terms of wear and tear and repairs, and cost of labor. For example, it talks about upkeep of facilities, but someone is managing these contracts in place of the former manager. And that isn't down here, what the cost of that is. That's one very big cost that isn't down here. It says 1,000 hours for upkeep of facilities, but nowhere does it talk about who's managing all of this and what her cost is. That's one blatant omission. So, until someone shows me that this really is making money, that to me is a very good reason not to approve it.
Well, I just want to counter that you can give us a year and we'll show you that we can make the money, or the staff can. So that's the only way to do it.
So the two arguments I've heard so far against this, one is that it will be depriving Atherton residents from technically using the park if there are any large events, because most large events that are depriving people from outside of Atherton. And the other thing I heard was that because we haven't done this yet and can't prove it, that there must be, we must assume it's going to be subsidized.
No.
We've asked town staff to make a comment about the new model and their projections on the thing. And to answer the question about whether or not it's subsidized, the question about the people who use the park, I think is conjecture. I think the real question here is, we want to do something that's going to right now offset the cost in part.
Jerry, I don't think you're listening. I'm saying that there are glaring omissions in the information that we've asked and we've been given, such as who's administering these contracts and what the cost of that administrator. Not because it hasn't been proven and we can't, and we don't know, so we shouldn't do it. But rather, there are projections that should be made, and we are not being given all of the information that we do have and should have at hand. Like what are actual labor costs, what are actual replacement costs, what are actual depreciation costs, what are actual costs of who's administering this. I'm sorry, Jerry, that is something that they do know because they pay that person's salary.
It doesn't change my conclusion. The town staff is competent, and that they looked at all of the costs associated with 2012, and I think we should go ahead and approve going ahead with 2012.
Well, we're going to have public comments first, because I'm going to get this one right.
I didn't make a motion.
Okay, but before we do, I've got a couple questions that I could ask. So how many parking places are at the park, and is it possible that we could limit the size? Because there's two issues here. One is the costs need a little bit more refinement, and we're getting down to less than 1% of total town revenue, so is it really worth it for less than 1%? Secondly, though, is it the enjoyment of the park by residents, and we want to make sure that we preserve places for our residents to go. So, the average size of a wedding, can we put restrictions on that, and how much space is available for our residents?
Yeah, I mean, those are things the council can do as far as putting limits on the sizes of the weddings. If you think they're too big, or sizes of the meetings, those are definitely, they could impact the marketability of the sales of the, let's say, a wedding. If you put currently we don't recommend any more than 250 people at a wedding. Anything over 200 is considered a large event. But, and we try to, say 200 is like maximum. Occasionally, you might have run into one that was one of those, a few times a year where somebody will have a real shindig, so to speak, and there's 250 person wedding. But we could put a lower end limit on it, 225, something like that. Or, and then Mike, I think you had some information on the parking numbers.
Yes, and actually the answer to your parking question is kind of a multiple choice answer. And the information that I have, because this was recently looked at, and it was looked at as part of the environmental screening analysis that LSA Consultants did as part of the site selection process for the library. So what I'm going to be providing you is information that was provided as part of that report. Currently, there are 3 existing parking lots at the park that actually have stripes for cars. If you count all those spaces, that equals 124. In addition, there are some parking along the access roads coming into the park. It's possible to park along those roads safely, and you can get an equivalent of 36 additional spaces by allowing that. And in the past, when there has been large park events, the town has also allowed people to use the South Meadow or North Meadow area for parking, and which means that they would be parking on existing turf, and approximately 80 cars can be parked there. So when you add up those 3 numbers, it equals 240.
Okay, thank you.
And one more thing on the large events, I think Google keeps coming up. Google rents meeting space there a number of times a year. However, one day a year, they do have their huge corporate event. They bring in practically a circus, and they'll have upwards of 600 people plus at that park. But that is one day a year, and it's during the week. And yes, it's a bit of a fiasco over there, but that is a one-day event.
But I would also point out, the times I've been there, looking, apart from the parking situation altogether, at one event when I was there, they were using very, very loud music. I don't know whether they were dancing or whatever it was, but if I was a resident of Atherton, I would want to go to a park. A park's a place where you expect quietness. You might go there to just sit and enjoy it. And if you're gonna have live music there, I wouldn't go. I wouldn't go that. I'm not going to a park to listen to a band or whatever it is that's going on. Whether that's typical now, I don't know, but every time I've been there, which isn't a large number of times, but it's on a sample basis, there's been live music there.
So I just want to add my experiences at the park. I take my little dog, we go running in the park. There's never anybody there when I go to the park on the weekends. I go Saturday and Sunday, because I can't go on the weekdays, but there's nobody there.
Because we've not had anybody this year.
No, but I mean, I've had my dog for 3 years, so. And also, I've been to Swing in the Park. It's a town-wide sponsored thing, but we've had tons of loud music, and we've had tons of people, and we've had lots of, music. And I've been to corporate events where there's had music. I mean, it's not unusual to have a party and have music. And the town sponsors the Swing in the Park, the Dames does, but lots of music. So, I mean, that's one day, and people understand that. Any public comment?
Yes. Any public comment, please?
Walter Sleeth, 227 Catalpa Drive. I am very sympathetic with Ms. McKeithen's and Mr. Joby's comments. One is really philosophical, the other is economic. And all I want to do is offer on the economic side that if we are able to cover our variable costs at these events and going on, and look to Mr. Danielson and Ms. Ocker to confirm this, and you're covering some of the fixed costs, which go on and on and on. Even though you're not making a profit, it still may be worthwhile to have these events, subject to the concerns that Mr. Dobby mentions. Thank you.
Charles, you have a comment?
Charles Marsala, Emily, I'll go back in agreement there, is that you bring in $5,000 for an event, you have to make money. I mean, that's hard to lose money when someone's going to give you $5,000 to be there for a few hours. You're going to have some cost of wear and tear, you're going to have some cost of some labor. But if you look at just booking that event, and I would imagine that there's some staff time for oversight, but that's Steve, and some of that's already fixed costs because you already have those salaries to pay. We're just seeing you're going to make money. So rather than postpone this and lose the catering committee that you have, and if you go forward with this, you have the opportunity to monitor it and see. And I know there was one year when we were renovating the pavilion, and it couldn't be rented out, and the renovations went longer than were needed, so that whole summer was lost. When we look at those numbers of revenue, that's not written down in there as a footnote that says in 2006, or was it 7, that we lost all these bookings because they didn't know if they were going to be able to, it was under construction. And you would have had more revenue historically on that. The other thing is, it is philosophical if you want to rent it out or not, but if there are parking places, maybe you put a sign up that says no wedding parking or no events parking or reserved for Atherton residents or something to let people realize that there's some set aside. I've been there for a friend's wedding. It was a wonderful experience. I've been there when the other weddings were going on, and it seemed to be okay. So I was able to enjoy the park while those happenings were happening. And I think that it doesn't impact that many residents, but it also shows that you're bringing in revenue, and it probably is in that 50,000 plus range, or at least every day that you do it, you could probably bring in $3,000 after you take out the cost.
Could I stand here? I can't really see very well. My name is Stuart Aubrey, and I may be missing something really big here, but I have a question about an event that takes place daily during the winter time and the spring, and that is the nursery school. That is an event, in my view, and I don't know if it is self-supporting or, but I do have a question. Where does that fit into the event schedule, and whether we make money or lose money?
We're paid a lease on the play school, and so it's independent of the other events.
I think we signed a contract on it, middle of last year.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah,
extended
it's
it
what,
for
10
1 year,
years,
pending
so.
gotten on what the library was gonna do.
Well, it does impact the use of the park. In the morning, the traffic coming and going is dangerous, actually, because I've been there many, many mornings to play tennis, and it's a miracle that some little child has not been run over, for one thing. So talking about impacting people that use the park, it does.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Valerie?
Valerie Gardner. So I have 2 points to make. One is that I haven't been living here that long, but in the 13 years I've been living here, I run pretty much every weekend. I'm always there in the morning, never seen the park completely parked up in that entire time that I can recollect. So if it has happened, it's pretty infrequent. The second point I want to make is that I'm kind of amazed that the council has taken so long to come to this point to resume taking rentals for the park, because there was never a council vote to stop it. There's a lot of zeal to put the library in the park, and the decision to stop leasing and renting the park space was never made by the council. It was done somehow without a council vote. And when I, as an EPC program organizer, tried to reserve the use of the pavilion in September, I was told that I couldn't have an event there because the library was going to be built. And this was for last September. And I was told that they weren't letting the use of the pavilion be used even by a town committee because the library was going into the park. And when I asked, well, how did that decision get made? I didn't know that the pavilion was going to be torn down in September. I was told that the mayor decided that. And I think that this council needs to figure out how they're making decisions, because this does not seem like a decision that was made through the proper procedures. And that's my point. Thank you.
Are there any other comments specifically on the agenda item that's at hand? Okay, and we'll come back to the council. Any further discussion?
I make a motion that we move ahead and book events in 2012 as per the town staff's outline as how that would be handled.
I have a question to ask the finance person.
Yeah.
Could you tell me how much it costs for our person, if it's still the person in the police department, to oversee the park events when she was doing it?
Currently, it's my understanding that there is not a person in the police department that's overseeing events. The third-party contract are the ones that are booking the events and responding to questions. I believe Mr. Tyler is the only one that's really supervising any of the maintenance staff. He's really just supervising the contract. The contract that we have for maintenance already has built-in supervision, as well as the cost here for the facilities cost includes the supervising of the employee that's on staff doing the facilities set up and tear down. That's my understanding.
But when the person in the police department was doing that, I know she's been spending a lot of time on this. What is the amount of time and the cost that's been spent?
Councilmember McKeith and I can answer that. Jennifer Fu, who has multiple tasks that she does in the police department, training our manager, she's my administrative assistant, but she does spend time assisting with that process. She fields phone calls, works with Carlos and the event organizers, works with Steve, but it's an additional duty.
Yes, so what approximate cost is that for time?
You know, I really don't have an accurate assessment of that. I have to discuss that with her.
Might be a day, a week, you think? Guesstimate? Less, half a day a week?
Maybe half a day a week. I think, you know, maybe an hour or so a day.
Mr. Mayor, I did make a motion earlier.
I second it.
We just were collecting additional information. All right, well, I guess we can have a vote. So all in favor of the motion to restart the events at the park Opposed?
Opposed.
So, motion fails. All right, next we'll move on to item 20, which is the clarifications for the library EIR. John?
Actually, Mike Kashwagi is going to take the lead on that one, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mayor and City Council, at your November 16th meeting, the City Council approved a professional services agreement with LSA Associates to prepare an environmental impact report for the preferred alternative location for the new library in Holbrook Palmer Park. As LSA is beginning the preparation of the EIR, it is very important the document accurately reflects council direction. Accordingly, the purpose of this report is to confirm and clarify direction for two important items. The first item is the maximum footprint of the new library, and the second item is the reuse of the existing library structure after completion of the new library. Regarding the maximum footprint, it is staff's understanding that the new library building is limited to the existing main house footprint plus the associated hardscape areas, and the new library building footprint will not exceed 10,000 square feet. Your staff report includes an aerial photo of the existing main house area with dashed lines that outlines the limits of the associated hardscape area. And the approximate size of that area is 15,000 square feet. Regarding the reuse of the existing library building, for the purposes of the environmental evaluation, it is staff's understanding that the environmental document will describe the reuse of the existing library as for town offices, public purposes, record storage, and/or art center, subsequent to the active library moving to the proposed new location in Palmer Park. As part of this report, staff also wanted to clarify and confirm the nature and scope of the Holbrook Palmer Park Master Plan update, which was included as part of the council motion at your October 19th meeting. For this item, it is staff understanding and intent that the master plan update will be limited to simply revising the existing master plan drawing to show the proposed new library footprint and revisiting the text of the existing master plan to address the replacement of the existing main house building and then with the new library, the change in use of this public space, and to identify where existing uses in the main house will be relocated. So that is staff's report and council discussion.
Question, Mike. I'm a little confused here, looking at the photo and the outline for the 10,000 square foot site. It appears to me that it takes in some trees and some area that I would consider as green space. Am I looking at the wrong sketch here, or what?
I think there are, well, I guess I defer to Lisa on it, but I do believe there might be some existing trees.
Well, it shows that very clearly here on the photo.
What we tried to do on the picture is just outline in an approximate way where the limits of the hardscape area was, just to give council that perspective.
Well, I think using the term hardscape to depict the 10,000 square foot rectangle that you have here is a mischaracterization. Hardscape is basically, in my view, would be the main house and the concrete patio area.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why we brought this back to council, because staff would like direction and clarification on that.
Well, I think we have clarification at prior meetings, but let me ask a question about the third item. Well, let me take the second item first. Regarding the Holbrook Palmer Park Master Plan, in your November staff report from you and the town planner, it said one of the steps is Park and Recreation Commission public hearings and recommendation on the Park Master Plan and about specific location, size, and scope of library sites in Holbrook Palmer Park. That was in your staff report last month.
No.
I didn't hear that same verbiage tonight. I heard much more narrow definition that it simply is substituting one thing for another, whereas last month you said it included the specific location, size, and scope of library sites in Hopewell Common Park. So which is it?
Well, as far from a process standpoint, it's still, it still needs to go through the process of going to Parks and Rec. But the reason why, again, we wanted to bring it back and as part of this report is because we just wanted to clarify, and at this point, really clarify with council that the intent isn't to do a full-blown, revisit of the park. It's really just going to be limited to, once the location of the new library would be located, to actually show that on a drone, and then make these other modifications to the text as noted.
The third item I have a question also is about the use of the current library site, and you named some possible uses and so forth, and we had a suggestion earlier on that a master plan, which the council's turned down previously, the master plan for the town be developed, and there was some discussion at the last very brief discussion, as I recall, at the last town center task force meeting, that we need to include the current library site in looking at the town center buildings, but at this point, to assume that's going to be used for town staff and that type of thing, and not for some new use, I think that's rather arbitrary decision. Any comments on that?
Well, my only comment on that, again, that is why we're bringing this to the council, because it's part of